Welcome back to the Unwellness community. I know it's been a while. I took a break and I wanted to relaunch this podcast in a way that was authentic. Honestly, the last two interviews I did with my past guests were very emotionally draining, and I write about it in the blog. I don't want to get too much into it because it's a new start, and I'm so grateful that all of you have tuned back in. So this is available on Apple, Spotify and YouTube to release a video on the Unwellness community video on YouTube. So if you can't listen to it, prefer to watch it, I recommend watching it on YouTube. If you love to listen to it, you can listen to it here too. Thank you everybody. I'm so grateful that you're listening, and please subscribe. A review would be great too. Today I'm going to be talking, well, not necessarily talking, but I'm going to be sharing testimonials of people who have been around Teal Swan, who have had not the best experiences. Now, the whole idea behind the Unwellness community is that we shed light on the negative aspects of the wellness community. And that's why I called it Unwellness, because there's a lot of things I have had personal experiences going on behind the scenes that people just shun and push to the side. They don't really take seriously. So I'm just giving them a voice. My opinion doesn't really matter. I've had my own experiences that I've spoken about, but this time I want to shed light on testimonies that may or may not be true. That's not for me to push on you, but I encourage you just to listen and not to be shocked. Sometimes the people, the highest up, like Kanye West says, highest up have the lowest self-esteem, and they can do crazy things. I've seen it firsthand. Seen this firsthand with major yoga studios, with yoga teachers. I've had my own experiences with spiritual teachers. I'll get into that actually very soon. I had an awful experience with the Byron Katie program, and I'm actually going to share that story very, very soon. But for now, this is testimony of people who were around Teal Swan, and I'm not here saying this, and I'm not doing this to vilify her. I just want to shed light and acknowledge that true healing needs to take place in the wellness community, and it's not going to come in the form of gurus. It's not going to come in the form of us expecting other people to do the healing. It's going to come from us finding our own inner strength and moving forward. I do also want to just read out a disclaimer, or tell you a disclaimer. I'm going to leave a suicide prevention tab also at the bottom in the description box, because to me those situations are very serious, and they are not to be taken lightly. So I do think it's a red flag whenever somebody or guru says to you, when it's time, or you have going through a very difficult time in your life, that they shun off medical options. I don't think that that's the only option, but when you find your healing in the form of an anti-anxiety or antidepressive and it works for you, I don't think anybody has the right to tell you that you should be off of it. That's just my opinion. I don't think that all pharmaceuticals are bad. I don't think that all treatments are bad. I think some people really, really do need them, and I'm not in the position to tell somebody that they shouldn't be on it or they should be on it. That's not our expertise as people in the wellness community. So I will check back in throughout the video, and thank you so much for watching. Like I said, please comment, subscribe, enjoy.
Everyone knows her story is hard to believe.
Do you ever doubt that maybe this is just some sort of nightmare that you had and you just relived it, or do you ever doubt that this happened to you?
No.
Ever?
No.
At age 19, during what Teal calls a ritual in eastern Idaho, she decided it was time to run. She left Idaho and headed back south to Utah to a friend she knew she could trust.
One day became 2 days, 2 days became 3 days, 3 days became 4 days. And then it was like, after a while, I really had that full urge of like, I don't want to go back. And so it started turning into fear of going back, and then I just hid, basically, with him.
From there, things started to turn around, but sharing her stories was still hard.
It's because you've been traumatized and you have no option. I mean, it's too difficult to talk to somebody who's been in a space of freedom. You can't really explain to them what it's like to mentally be in the situation where you would do anything you were told to do, because you don't have another option.
Over time, Teal overcame that problem. She's now dedicated her life to sharing her experience and hopefully helping others who may be going through the same thing.
One of the major purposes is for me to be like an example for people who, especially women, who are going through these types of really painful things, to know that, you know what, this old paradigm of the fact that you're just damaged goods for the rest of your life is not true.
So the testimonies go as follows. I'm going to start with a former childhood friend, and then an admin, and the last few, an admin and somebody who was in the program, and then we'll get into men who were, they believe, lured by her. So there's 2 accounts that I have of particular men who feel like they were lured by her. So please stay tuned, keep an open mind. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Enjoy.
Someone else to fix this problem that Teal's created. You just can't stay quiet when you hear how bad it's gotten. So.
And I also don't think anyone would blame you if you hadn't wanted to do this. Like, it's so brave. It's so much to like unravel, and just I can't imagine what the process of like processing all of that has been like, from something that started at 9, that when you met her at 23 was still able to like profoundly affect you. It's just absolutely wild.
It's
courageous, yeah.
So courageous.
It's trauma that doesn't go away. So yes, I understand it. But it's forever affected the path of my life. And if I go down a rabbit hole and think, what if I hadn't met her when I was younger? Where would my life be now? Would I have had a normal life? Like, would I have been able to go to high school and not have to go to like treatment and miss out so much of my life, all my relationships be compromised? So I understand it, but I still grieve what I missed out on and what I'll never get back. That damage is there. It's not something that you just snap your fingers, this was all fake, it's not going to affect me anymore. It doesn't work like that. So I can't fathom that she's openly doing this, and these families are losing their children, these families are losing themselves in all of this, and you're forever altering the course of someone's life and all the people around them. And it's not this like self-help thing that's going to make anyone better. It destroys lives, which is the opposite of what these things are supposed to be doing, which shows you when you have, I guess this is where I have stronger feelings about Teal. When you have someone that I believe to be almost a sociopath in nature, playing mental health, playing spiritual guru with vulnerable people. You're ruining their lives for your own gain.
Yeah. Well, the first and prime example is when people get desperately suicidal and they reach out for help. I was always dismayed when I saw that kind of thing. I think we were talking about this the other day, and I was saying that when I was concerned with not just the person, which I was, because I've had experiences in the past where I know people who have committed suicide and have been close to them. So I understand, some of how to help people like that, what to do in situations like that, because when that affects you personally, you tend to want to find out ways that doesn't happen again. But I felt really isolated and alone in those situations, and so I did what I thought was best at the time. But there was also the confusing part of it was that Teal's attitude towards it was very flippant. And so based on the fact that most people were emulating her or following her instruction on how to be able to deal with or cope with people like that, there was this element of coldness towards people that were like that. The majority of people would say nothing, and then there would only be a few people who would say, that's not a good idea, don't do that, kind of thing. But there was nobody who was outright saying, look, this is a serious problem, you need to seek medical advice about this, you must go to your doctor if this kind of thing is happening. There was none of that. It was more, here's a video that you should watch of Teal talking about it, or just, hang on and wait, and it. But there was no instructions to me or other administrators, me or to Derek, about how to cope with it or how to deal with it or how to make sure that we had the tools to be able to handle anything like that. Because when you are a teacher or a leader or, whatever position you put yourself in, and you're talking to people about these subjects and about mental illness or when you're telling people that the right way to deal with it, and you're giving people instructions about it, you have to realize that you have a responsibility of care for those people.
But that's just a different story. So Kelsey, I want to hear about your experience being involved with the Teal Swan world. How did you first hear about her? What drew you into this, and what was the extent of your involvement?
So I just get so excited that people are talking about her, because for a long time the only voices online about her were positive voices, her followers, and she started online, so there was really no other information about her. She was sort of like a YouTube guru. I started following her maybe 10 years ago, so I was like 22 or 23, and I had just gotten diagnosed with a chronic illness, and I didn't know. I was just kind of in a dark place mentally. I was like, there's no certain treatment methods. I was getting a lot of medical gaslighting as a female, seeking treatment for a chronic illness. And,
that happens a lot.
Yeah. And so I was into meditation and things like that, and trying alternative treatments, like going to naturopathic doctors, and just really trying to find anything to help me reclaim a sense of control over my life, I guess you could say. And I had been watching a lot of different YouTube videos about other people who had similar diagnoses, and she had started with a series called Ask Teal on her YouTube channel, and it was one of the ones that got recommended to me because she had really just started with spiritual questions, right? So people could ask her different spiritual questions or questions about depression or anxiety or kind of anything like that. And it was I thought that her content was a really interesting perspective as someone who loosely grew up in a Christian background, but wasn't a practicing Christian anymore, and was in a dark spot and sort of looking for any sort of reason for, why am I going through this? Why me? That sort of young and not understanding what was going on in my life. And so I started really following her Ask Teal series. And I think what was really interesting about her is she sort of provided, versus like some other self-help people, was like, she would give like tips, like, okay, so if you are like going through a panic attack, you need to do XYZ, versus some other self-help people would just be like, oh, try and meditate more. Like, they weren't very like specific, they were very vague, and she would always give like very specific ways to deal with things. And I read 2 of her books. I read The Sculptor in the Sky and Shadows Before Dawn. And I was also really into like shadow work and kind of like trying to understand the trauma that I was going through with managing my chronic illness and things like that. And as I got a couple years into her work is when she kind of shifted, and as she started talking more about like her views about mental health treatment were basically like, if you are on any medication, you should not, like, the goal is to not be on any medication, right?
Oh, wow.
That's her goal. Like, I don't want you on any medication for mental health treatment. I don't want anybody on any medication for any physical ailments. And you should be eating like a raw vegan diet, and foods have different vibrations. So if you're eating meat, that's a food vibration. Yeah, so it got like, that's kind of when I was like, wait a minute, what? So that started like the red flags of like, you shouldn't be eating meat. It has low vibration, no animal products, all like raw vegetables and fruits and
cacao.
Yeah, like no sugar.
Like vegan, you can do a vegan diet in a healthy way, but from what I've heard, and Kat, if you're in the chat, correct me if I'm wrong. From what I've heard, a raw vegan diet is you're not gonna get as much value out of the food, because from what I've learned, like the process of like cooking the food and adding heat to it actually kind of like, because calories are heat energy, so it's cooking the heat into the food that kind of gives you a new it gives you more value out of the food. So if you're eating it raw, everything, that like humans weren't meant to eat raw. I could be wrong about that, but Kat's over here being like, yikes about the vibrating food and all of that.
Right, and so that was like one of my first red flags. And then my other red flag, as someone with anxiety and depression who needs to be on some sort of medication, when she started saying like, I don't want, like the reason people have mental illnesses, even if it's an anxiety disorder. So she would sort of lump them all in the same, like schizophrenia and anxiety disorder, any sort of mental disorder, mental illness. She started preaching it as like, the reason that you have that is because you never felt safe as a child. And it was never like, oh, this is a legitimate illness that needs treatment for a lot of people, and you should go to therapy. She was very like against therapy because the mental health professions are like, they totally get everything wrong. And so she was like very against therapy and very against like being on medication. And as someone who that's very helpful for, I was like, okay. So then I started feeling a lot of this like internalized guilt of like, because she's also like a law of attraction practitioner.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And very much so like, I started believing basically the reason that I was sick was because I thought something about myself, right? Like I attracted the illness.
She's teaching everyone that we manifest our illnesses. This is horrible.
Yeah. And so then I would be like, well, I need to like really watch my thoughts because I attracted this illness, and I need to watch what I'm thinking. I don't want to attract anything else negative. And if you have anxiety or something like that, it's like you get random intrusive thoughts.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, and so then I started realizing as I like actually went to real therapy, like, oh, this is very detrimental. It's a very detrimental belief system.
Tealers. There's not really like a clear set name, because really it's all about Teal, and so the people that follow her, some of them call themselves Tealers, others don't necessarily identify that way but behave in quite a similar way. So,
so because one thing about that I see a lot with kind of new age groups is a lot of people take some things from this thing, some things from that thing, and they kind of make a syncretic sort of idea of their own place in reality and things like that. But you would say that, I don't know, maybe you would agree with this, that Teal's kind of teachings, they aren't as, welcoming towards some other kinds of ideas, especially mainstream ideas with mental health, right? I think that's probably one of the bigger criticisms.
Yeah, and Teal has, there's been a numerous times, I believe, where she's been recorded saying things about the mental health field, essentially disparaging the mental health field and its effectiveness. And there was a piece that went out on the BBC recently, which talked a little bit about Teal's attitudes towards mental health and suicide and things like that, and that goes down a really dark path, obviously, when you start talking about things like that. And anyone who knows anything about cults knows how often the idea of suicide crops up. I would say that I don't think that she's encouraging people necessarily to kill themselves, but I worry that what we're looking at is an overconfidence and an irresponsibility with regards to the effects of her advice and her teachings, if that makes sense. So that in terms of mental health, there's definitely some ideas there which separate, if someone is to follow those ideas, to separate them from the average person.
Can you give an example of like maybe some of those that maybe that's enough that you feel comfortable talking about?
Yeah, just generally the disparaging of the mental health field in general, saying that it doesn't help people who are suicidal and who are depressed and things like that. I'm sorry, by the way, that the cats are running around behind me at the moment.
Cat's fine. Cat's part
running
of the show,
riot. Yeah, anyone who watches my channel knows that they're always up to that. So I think that in terms of mental health field, it's just the general disparaging of mental health, and she talks about all sorts of different things. But what you do find with Teal is that what she'll do is she will, and I think Telltale talked about this in a recent video that he did about her, is that that she will take things that are true, that have been verified to be true, and then sprinkle other things in amongst that I believe would create a dependency on her as a leader, that would change the way that people are to behave, to act, and things like that. Followers are encouraged to do processes which are not really proper psychological processes. They're not taken through them with trained professionals who have proper certifications. Teal herself has no certifications, and yet she encourages people to do processes like shadow work, which I did a lot when I was in there, which we can go into perhaps a bit, and then her new process called the completion process, and it's all to do with trauma, recovered memories, things like that. And anyone who's done a little bit of research into recovered memories and things like that knows it gets quite dubious quite quickly.
Yeah, that recovered memory stuff, that's not a super new phenomenon. That's been around for a couple of decades now, especially, if you've ever looked into the satanic panic, for example, a lot of what those
intrinsically linked to Teal's story.
So a lot of what those people were doing that were kind of sussing out the details from people's past, they were kind of using suggestive techniques to kind of basically implement false memories. It's kind of like if you've ever seen Making a Murderer, like when they talk about the kid in that case, the police kind of, when they questioned him, he ended up making up this story because the police were kind of suggesting what should have happened if this kid was involved, even though it showed that he really wasn't too involved. So that doesn't surprise me that a process like that exists. I do wonder what else this group kind of does, and perhaps if we have time, I'd love to go into that more. But first, I'd love it if you could just tell us exactly how did you find yourself kind of influenced by this organization? How did you cross paths, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so for me, as with a lot of people who get into things like this, I was going through a bit of a tough moment in my life. I'd lost a close friend passed away, and I was the first person I'd lost in my life, so I was grieving, didn't really know what to do with that. And so I ended up spending a lot of time watching videos, watching documentaries, things like that. I cleared out the History Channel's Ancient Aliens back catalogue and moved on to a channel called Spirit Science, and through that channel, which is very new agey and that kind of stuff, yes, I found Teal. And it was really through the idea of the law of attraction, which, if anyone's familiar with that, they will know it, very woo. The Secret, it's sometimes called the idea that your thoughts create reality, and that you can influence things just by believing in them and whatever. That kind of thing, on like a universal level, rather than just believing in it and then acting on it and then doing.
The Secret is, to me, it's like, it is the essential New Age text. Like, I don't know a New Ager that doesn't reference that text in some form or fashion. You know what I mean? Like, I see it pop up everywhere.
And each leader has their own spin on it. You know, you've got like Abraham Hicks and all these kinds of people. But Teal's own spin, it gets into kind of, to use Lifton's turn of phrase, sacred science, gets into that very quickly. I mean, there's an argument definitely for the law of attraction being sacred science in and of itself. And then when you apply it to something that starts to look more like a cult, definitely ticks that box. But for me, it was the idea of the law of attraction, the idea of there being an explanation for the pain that I was going through and like the chaos and everything, like making sense of things. I felt like I came into an understanding, and listening to Teal talk about it, she seemed to understand it better than anybody I had kind of come across before. Because it's easy to understand something or to seem like you're understanding something if you're kind of making the rules as you're going along, and that's what I believe she's doing.
So what was an idea, like, what's an example of an idea that really appealed to you?
Well, I think the law of attraction in and of itself, definitely. The idea that I could influence things myself, and it was just a case of getting something in my head, like believing something, reaching a point in myself where I had no quote unquote resistance to that thing, which is a Teal thing. The whole "what you resist persists" is used quite a lot there.
Okay.
So that it was almost like it was a manual. You know, if I could understand this thing and I could get this thing down, then I could solve every problem, because it would extend to every problem I would come cross paths with in my life. Every problem I came across.
It's like a manual for life, right? It's like, hey, just follow the script here, and you'll get things done. If you've ever tried to train for a sales position, they'll tell you the same thing. It's like, look, just stick to the script. Don't iterate on this. You know, if you're really, really advanced, maybe you can do a thing or two, but otherwise stick to the script and you'll follow and you'll get life. And there's an appeal to that for sure, right?
Yeah, and I would say the same with like in the case of like conspiracy theories as well. I feel like a large part of the appeal of conspiracy theories is that they explain what is perhaps otherwise just chaos and people running riot and things that don't really make much sense in general. And I think for me there was definitely an appeal to feeling like, there's an answer here, there's something here that makes sense to me.
You got really into Teal to the point where you were actually making videos for Teal, kind of, right? Like about kind of some of Teal's teachings, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could say for Teal, we didn't really have any to and fro, no connection or anything between us. Yeah, we were only ever in the same room once and we'd never really had a direct conversation. But in terms of, in support of her teachings, in support of what she was doing, definitely. And, you know, there was a point where I was trying to be a spiritual teacher myself, which is definitely something that I should have been doing at the time. It's a strange and vast, it's a strange portion of my life, and the way that those ideas penetrated into all the different ways that I went about things in my life.
So you're looking into crystals, chakras, essential oils, all these paintings, Teal, other gurus, just trying to feel better. How does that continue? You find out about Teal.
I'm obviously great at telling stories.
No, you're great.
No, I mean, great. Some of this happened before I became suicidal. So 2010, I was into some of this stuff, and then I became suicidal in like 2011 in that instant. And so, and then I reached out for help and tried to see people to help me with like alternative medicine healers type people. So like sound therapy and Reiki, and just any type of therapy person.
And what's Reiki? Tell us what Reiki is.
So like they put their
You lie down on a table.
Yeah, and they put their hands over you.
You think it's like a masseuse, right?
Yeah.
But it's not. What is it?
They put their hands over you and you can like feel the energy or the body warmth. You can feel the body warmth while they go around your body and stuff like that.
And then what do they say they're doing?
Well, it's just, I mean, like, I'm not sure if they were actually certified in the right way of doing it, but each person I went to was kind of like, it's kind of like a talk therapy mixed in with it. So you would talk about your issues. Some of them would like suck the energy with their hands out of like your stomach, and they would say things like, oh, I see a black dog, and I'm like, oh, I had a black little dog when I was little, or, you know, you'd piece things together and make sense of your life and all sorts of things.
And couldn't they kind of, there's this idea of they could unclog your chakras.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
talk to you in the right way, and if they will put their hands over you in the right parts of your body, they would unclog your spiritual chakra.
Yeah, exactly.
And and then if they unclogged parts of your chakras, what would happen?
If everything got unclogged, then eventually you'd be enlightened, and if you were high enough vibration, then you could see auras and see everyone's future and all sorts of crazy. I mean, enlightenment was the goal.
Okay, so that's really important. So there's this idea that if you reach this right vibration with the right type of enlightenment, you have special powers.
Yeah.
Which is what Teal claims. She claims she has this third eye, and that she has clairvoyance, and she can see the future, make prophecies. And this goes back to Mormonism, like the ability to prophesy, right? The ability to channel spirits or special powers, or to see to the future, or to have special insight. I mean, this is the core to how cults emerge, right? Is people who claim to have these special powers. So, and then also kind of sell to the members that they can also achieve enlightenment like the gurus do. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned Reiki. I keep, you're a great storyteller. I keep wanting to learn about things you mentioned, so I'm the one derailing you from your story. But it's because I want to be educated. I want to be educated.
Oh, you're fine. I've just been jumping around. But I met Teal in 2010. We bought paintings. I went to their house. I met I think Blake and Mark there, and their little boy, I think, and what else happened? Oh, I bought a painting, and they started talking to me like, oh, once you leave Mormonism, then you're gonna learn so much stuff and all sorts of things. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, I wanted to know what they knew that I didn't, that made them happier and have a successful life. So anyways, I became suicidal, and I was looking for answers, and then I reached out to Teal like, hey, I'd love to be able to talk to her. And they were like, oh, she's not seeing any clients. And I said, okay, I've just been feeling really suicidal, and I was just wondering if there's anything she could do to help. And so they're like, oh, yes, she can totally help you. So she invited me over.
Well, okay, wait, that's important. So you didn't have access to her unless they could detect that you were in a really severely debilitated state. And I just want to say that, in Mormonism, it was the refugees from Europe who were, the potato famine and poverty in Europe. All these people in poverty, they were brought to Nauvoo or Kirtland under this promise of like a happier, healthier life. But part of what cults often do is they prey, and I'm not calling Mormonism a cult, but some of these are cult traits. And, cults prey on the highly vulnerable people, the people who are down and out. And that's an important ingredient, because how does David Koresh or Jim Jones or whoever get such loyalty? It's because they take people when they're so low, and then bring them into a relationship and into a community to sort of save them. And then those people feel very loyal and committed and dedicated to them because they feel like they were saved. Is all that right? Or
I mean, like in this instance, it wasn't. Yeah, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
What was it for you? I don't need you to fit the map pattern.
But so in this instance, she was coming in, like I was going to her house. She walked me up into her room and laid me down on her bed and lifted up my shirt and did chakra stuff, healing or whatever on my stomach, and tried to get me.
Did you have to pay to have this experience?
Yes, it was like $150 or whatever. And I can't remember, or maybe she, yeah.
And if a woman, an attractive woman, is like putting me on a bed, lifting my shirt, and putting her arms over me, as a Mormon ex-Mormon, like that, I'm not saying there's something sexual there, but in your mind,
oh yeah, no, well,
what's going on in your mind? She
later said that, like, obviously, like, how could you not know that was sexual or something like that? I totally wanted you to sleep with me or whatever.
She said that to you?
Yeah, but I mean, she said a bunch of lies later, so I trust everything with like a grain of salt. Sorry.